Hi, I'm JC Mock from Carson Durham Secondary School, and this is my personal project report. So my goal for the personal project was to make a cosplay of Ichigo Kurosaki. And Ichigo Kurosaki is an anime character, or a character from a Japanese TV show. And I came up with this because I've always wanted to do a cosplay. I just never really had the chance to. Either I didn't have the time, or the motivation, or the reason. And also it's pretty expensive to make a cosplay. So cosplay is when you dress up as a character from an anime. An anime is a Japanese cartoon. And Ichigo is a character from my favorite anime, Bleach. The criteria for my cosplay is that it needs to fit, it needs to be comfortable, and it also has to look like the uniform that Ichigo wears in Bleach. I chose Ichigo Kurosaki specifically because his uniform isn't too hard to make. It might use a lot of fabric, but the design isn't too complicated like a school uniform where there's the straight pants, the tie, the blazer and all that. It's pretty simple. I know I don't have the skill to make any of that, but that's also where my interest came in. I've always wanted to learn how to sew, but once again, I never had the chance because I didn't have a sewing machine and I didn't have the means to buy one. But that didn't stop me from watching YouTube videos and learning how to sew cool things online. And that's where a lot of my knowledge came in, other than the basics that I learned from Miss Shreves in grade 8 sewing class. She taught us how to thread a machine, put pant legs together, and how much seam allowance we should have. So the only thing I really needed to search up was Ichigo's Shinigami uniform blueprints, which was actually really easy to find because his Shinigami uniform is actually a traditional Japanese martial arts uniform. The top is called a kaikoji and the bottom is called a hakama. Once I found and printed the blueprints, I just needed to make a plan on how I would actually make the Shinigami uniform. But my plan wasn't a very good plan. I had to go back to investigation many times to find out where I could get the fabric for cheap and how much fabric I needed. Also, as you can see in my process journals number 1 and 2, I had a lot of trouble on who I was going to cosplay as, and I went back many times to change that. Like in my process journal number 1, it says, I believe I started with Sideshell from Hetalia, then many other characters in between that I don't remember. Then Grail Sutcliffe from Black Butler, and I finally decided to go with Rukia Kuchiki from Bleach. And in my process journal number 2, it says, so I spoke with my friends and they said I could cosplay better as Ichigo Kurosaki from Bleach, so yes, I changed again. Also, in process journal number 4, I said, Saturday I went back to Dressu Supplies downtown and bought the rest of the fabric I needed, saying that I went downtown twice instead of when I could have just gone downtown once. So the steps I started out with were really broad and not helpful at all. So first it said buy fabrics, second cut out blueprints, third sew fabric pieces together, and it was much harder than that. I obviously needed a better plan than that. So first of all, I didn't know how much fabric I needed. Secondly, before cutting out the fabric, I needed to draw out the blueprints on the fabric, because the blueprints were printed out on a normal size piece of paper, while the fabric was a lot bigger than that. And thirdly, there was a lot of changes that I needed to make, such as normally there were 2 pieces to the kaikoji, the inner layer and the outer layer. There's no difference to them. It's just one's for warmth, the inner layer is more for warmth, and the outer layer is more for design and fashion. And so instead of making 2 layers, I just made 1, and I just made the inner layer a bit more visible by putting the inner layer kind of like sticking out here and then along here. Another change I made was to the hakama, the pants, because normally the traditional hakama pants have a wooden or a really hard block on the back of the belt to keep your back straight, because it's for martial arts. I'm not too sure what it's really for, but it's to keep your back straight, and since I don't really need that, and it would be a lot of pain to add that in, and I don't really have much time to do that, I decided to take that piece out. So my global context is personal and cultural expression, and I think that the global context guided my project. Well, it didn't really guide my project, it's more my project that revolved completely around it, because I feel like this project was a way for me to express myself and what I really like, such as the such as anime and the Japanese culture. But unlike the Japanese culture that's very well managed and where the kids have good time management skill, good grades, and they work really hard at school, I'm not so sure I had those skills during this project because, well, first of all, I wasn't very well organized and I lost a lot of time going back to organize myself. Also, since I didn't have a sewing machine at home, I had to fit my schedule with someone at school who could supervise me in the sewing room, and that would be Miss Reeves. But Miss Reeves had a busy schedule and so did I, so finding a time where we could both be in the sewing room was quite difficult. But in the end, I managed and I finished my personal project on time, so that was good. But I think if I had a sewing machine at home, I could have been a lot more organized and I would have been more time efficient, a bit more like the Japanese. So, as you heard, you probably noticed that my personal project plan was a very bad plan. But after the first thing went wrong, I just kind of went with the flow, took whatever came at me, and that turned out actually pretty well. But I think I'm the kind of person that once I have a goal and a starting point, a good starting point, you can just let me go and I'll get the project done with or without a plan. So for this project, the only plan I had was the blueprints, and I think that's all I really needed because in the end the product, the cosplay, turned out really pretty well, and it's something I'm proud of. It's not high quality because I'm an amateur, but it's, like I said before, it's still pretty good. It still turned out pretty good, and it's something I'm proud of, and I'm so glad I got it done. And I have Miss Reeves to thank for all of that because whenever I had a question, she answered it, and whenever I came face to face with a big problem, like when I made 2 right legs instead of a left one and a right one, she helps me out. And she also took time out of her busy schedule to help me. Like I said in my 4th process journal, there isn't always a teacher in the sewing room, so I had to make a few appointments with Miss Reeves to be in the sewing room after school. So during this project, I learned quite a lot about sewing a cosplay. First of all, I learned that just choosing who you're going to cosplay is a huge hassle. Like, I went through 11 characters before I decided who I was actually going to do. Also, even when you're set on a character, you might change your mind at the end, and you're just like, wait, what? Also, secondly, I learned how to really sew and deal with fabric, because before it was just watching videos on YouTube, but they were actually really helpful too. Thirdly, I learned how to flip a thin piece of fabric that's been sewn on one end to the other. Yeah. Also, lastly, I learned that it's actually pretty hard, not as easy as it looked on the videos. It's a lot harder. So during this whole process, I learned that I'm more of a person that goes with the flow, and I'm not really good at making plans, but I guess I'm okay at following other people's plans, just not ones I make myself, because they don't seem to be very good in the first place. But I also learned that I'm one that prefers working with my hands, and I like wrapping my head around wrapping my head around things that I don't understand. I prefer physical labor and making things with my hands than sitting in front of a computer all day and making programs or such. And also, participating in the personal project has made me a bigger inquirer, risk-taker, and deeper thinker. Like I already said before, my product turned out really well, and is something I'm very proud of. And the only thing I would do differently is that I would make the kaikoji a little bit longer, and same with the hakama, because I made them a bit too short because I didn't measure the seam allowance properly. So yeah, thank you for listening.